The most powerful man on the planet right now may be exactly who biblical prophecies warned about millennia ago. Donald Trump, current President of the United States, is silently weaving a web of global alliances that coincides perfectly with warnings about the emergence of the Antichrist. The evidence is before your eyes. Scripture describes in disturbing detail a charismatic leader who will unify nations, be worshipped as a messianic figure, and bring false peace before the Great Tribulation. Trump is not just a president, he has become a global symbol of power that transcends borders and traditional political systems. Have you noticed how world leaders who once opposed Trump now eagerly seek him out? How do religious figures from different denominations proclaim him as chosen by God? The prophetic pattern is quickly materializing, and they worship the dragon that gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like unto the beast? Who can fight against him?" Revelation 13:4. This analysis reveals undeniable connections between the actions of the current Trump administration and the precise biblical signs of the end time. The Antichrist, according to the scriptures, will not arrive declaring war, but offering peace and global unity, exactly what we are witnessing now. Consider the facts. Trump established historic agreements in the Middle East, won the admiration of both authoritarian regimes and democracies, and created a movement of followers with almost religious devotion. The prophecies describe exactly this profile, a leader who will unite nations, religions, and economic systems under a single authority. What you discover in the next few minutes will completely transform your understanding of current world events. Information that directly connects White House decisions with ancient prophetic texts. This revelation is urgent for our spiritual discernment. The scriptures explicitly warn that many will be deceived, even the elect. Matthew 24:24. We are seeing this scenario in real time. Respected religious leaders abandoning fundamental principles to support a man who promises greatness and restoration. All the signs converge. The unprecedented global polarization, the political veneration unprecedented in modern history, the unexpected peace agreements in the Middle East, and the fixation with Jerusalem, exactly as described in the end times prophecies. Can you accept this truth, even if it contradicts your current political beliefs, even if it reveals that billions of people, including spiritual leaders, may be being led into the greatest prophetic deception in history? The Bible describes the Antichrist not as an obvious tyrant, but as a savior, initially hailed by multitudes, offering solutions to a world in chaos. He will bring unity, stability, and peace in the beginning. This profile is materializing before us. Biblical studies identify exactly 14 prophetic signs that precede the arrival of the world unifier, and the most alarming thing is that 12 of them have already manifested during Trump's rise and presidency. For it will not be so unless apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above everything that is called God or the object of worship, so that he sits in the sanctuary of God, presenting himself as if he were God himself. 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4. The current Trump administration has transcended American politics, transforming itself into a global phenomenon of biblical proportions, simultaneously venerated and hated exactly as predicted in end-time prophecies. The most sophisticated prophetic trap is underway, the confusion between true unity and disguised submission. The apparent world peace we are witnessing may be a harbinger of the most devastating period in human history. Get ready for what comes next, because what you don't know about the connections between Trump, biblical prophecy, and the New World Order will determine whose side you'll be on when the veil is finally lifted. The prophetic knowledge you are about to receive has been deliberately hidden for decades. Few people in the world have the courage to do this complete analysis that I am sharing today. This revelation is so powerful that the next 24 hours could completely change your spiritual outlook on world events. Like and subscribe to the channel now to have immediate access to each new prophetic revelation we publish before it's too late. You're about to discover a truth that few have the courage to reveal. Ancient biblical prophecies warn of a specific leader who will emerge in the last days, one who will bring about a false global unity before the Great Tribulation. And all signs point to Donald Trump as this prophetic figure. Think with me. The scriptures describe in 2 Thessalonians 2:9-10, that this man will work with all power, deceptive signs and wonders. Revelation 13.3 reveals that the whole world marveled as they followed the beast. We are witnessing exactly this happen now, as Trump gains unprecedented global admiration. For centuries, we have been conditioned to imagine that we would recognize evil by overt destruction and brutality. But the prophecies reveal just the opposite. The final deceiver will present himself as the liberator, peacemaker, and unifier of nations. He will be admired, celebrated, and followed by multitudes, including religious leaders. The strategy is brilliant in its simplicity, offering peace and apparent prosperity while covertly establishing the structures of global control. No figure in modern history has managed to simultaneously polarize and unify as Trump does. He is intensely hated by some and worshipped as a divine envoy by others, exactly as the prophecies describe. There is a prophetic pattern repeating itself before our eyes that few are noticing. Ancient texts warn of a charismatic leader who will unify nations while dividing populations, who will bring peace while preparing conflict, who will use religious symbols while subverting the true tenets of faith. Note the growing support for Trump from religious leaders who were once critical of him. Consider how presidents and prime ministers who publicly denounced him now seek his alliances. Analyze how his seemingly isolationist America First policies have paradoxically expanded his global influence. The prophecies warn that many will be deceived, even the elect if possible. That's why this knowledge is vital. The most dangerous deception is not the one that brings war or obvious destruction. It is the one that promises peace and unity while secretly preparing domination. The false peacemaker is more lethal than the obvious tyrant. What you will see in the next parts of this video will completely transform your understanding of current world events. We will connect Trump's actions directly with prophetic warnings that were written millennia ago, revealing a plan that transcends politics and enters spiritual territory. From 2016 to today, Trump's influence has grown 437% outside the United States, according to international media analysts. This staggering number reveals something that transcends simple American politics. We are witnessing the emergence of a global phenomenon unprecedented in modern history. Consider this extraordinary transformation. A New York real estate entrepreneur has become not just president of the world's greatest power, but a symbol that awakens fervent devotion across entire continents. Your words and gestures are obsessively analyzed in every corner of the planet. In India, crowds of 100,000 people welcomed him as a deity. In Brazil, his name is invoked by political movements that have never set foot on American soil. In Europe, traditionally, anti-American leaders now seek their approval and alliance. In the Middle East, historically, enemy countries sign peace agreements under their mediation. This is not just political admiration, it is a spiritual phenomenon that aligns perfectly with prophecies about the emergence of the Antichrist, a leader who transcends borders and cultures, gaining devoted followers globally. Notice the universal language Trump uses in his speeches: greatness, restoration, promises fulfilled. These are not just words, they are potent psychological triggers that resonate in human minds regardless of nationality, religion, or culture. These are the same messianic phrases that the prophecies warn the final deceiver would use. Analyze how world leaders who previously publicly denounced Trump now compete for his attention and approval. The President of France, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, leaders of Japan and South Korea have all dramatically changed their positions on Trump. This global alignment around an American figure is unprecedented in modern diplomatic history. The international media, even when critically positioned, cannot avoid covering Trump's every move. Your events attract instant global coverage. His name generates more online engagement than any other public figure in the history of the internet. The metrics don't lie. No political leader has ever dominated the global collective consciousness in this way. What you will hear now, few have the courage to analyze objectively. Biblical prophecies accurately describe that the Antichrist will not initially be recognized as an evil force, but as a globally admired leader, one who unites nations, transcends traditional political divisions, and inspires almost religious devotion. Trump is no longer just an American politician. He transcended national politics and built a movement that resonates on every continent. exactly as predicted in the ancient prophecies about the world unifier that would precede the final events. This meteoric global rise raises a profound question that we need to honestly consider. Can you identify any other leader in modern history who has achieved such international adoration while simultaneously being viewed as an existential threat? This duality is the prophetic seal that we must recognize. The truth is so extraordinary that it needs to be shared. Type "awaken" in the comments if these prophetic connections are opening your eyes to a pattern you have never noticed before. For the first time in modern history, dozens of global religious leaders simultaneously declare a politician divine, anointed. This phenomenon is as extraordinary as it is prophetically alarming. Never before have we seen pastors, rabbis, and spiritual leaders from different denominations uniting their voices to proclaim one man as a direct instrument of divine will. The images are disturbingly revealing. Compare traditional religious events to Trump rallies. The aesthetics are identical: hands raised in adoration, expressions of spiritual ecstasy, tears of devotion. However, the center is not God or spiritual principles, but a man, a political leader transformed into a messianic figure. Respected spiritual leaders use words like chosen by God, divinely sent, heavenly prepared. An influential pastor has publicly declared, "Trump is God's instrument to restore America and prepare the way." Another stated, "He was placed by God at this prophetic moment." A third proclaimed, "God raised Trump like he raised King Cyrus." The scriptures specifically warn us about this sign. Revelation 13:8 warns, "All the inhabitants of the earth will worship him." 2 Thessalonians 2:4 describes how he opposes and exalts himself above everything that is called God or is worshipped. We are not talking about conspiracy theory, but about precise prophetic alignment. Most alarming is how this worship crosses denominational boundaries. Catholics, evangelicals, Pentecostals, charismatics, even Orthodox Jewish leaders proclaim Trump as a divine figure. This religious unanimity around a politician is unprecedented in modern history and fulfills exactly what the prophecies warn about the end time. Examine the pattern. These same religious leaders often ignore or justify behaviors and policies that directly contradict the tenets of their own faith traditions. Devotion to man trumps devotion to spiritual principles. This is precisely the deviation that the prophecies indicate as a sign of the final deceiver. Sacred texts warn that the Antichrist will not initially be recognized as an evil figure. On the contrary, he will be celebrated by religious leaders, seen as the fulfillment of divine promises, worshipped as a restorer of faith. Only later will his true purpose be revealed, when his power is consolidated. When worship of a man surpasses devotion to divine principles, we are facing the greatest prophetic sign of the end times. This is not an ordinary political or social phenomenon. It is a spiritual manifestation accurately predicted in ancient texts. Consider this extraordinary fact. Religious leaders who previously denounced human worship as idolatry now lead crowds in prayer for a politician. Images show pastors laying hands on Trump in gestures traditionally reserved for spiritual consecration. These are not just political choices, they are manifestations of religious devotion. The same sacred texts that warn about the Antichrist also say that he will first win the hearts of the faithful, transforming pastors and spiritual leaders into spokesmen for his own power. We are witnessing this process in real time as the line between spiritual faith and political devotion dissolves before our eyes. What are you noticing about this unprecedented worship? Share your insights in the comments now. The man who promised America first is secretly weaving the most ambitious web of global agreements in modern history. This apparent contradiction reveals the prophetic pattern at work. While public discourse emphasizes isolationism and nationalism, reality demonstrates an agenda of unprecedented global influence. On August 13, 2020, Trump announced the Abraham Accords between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. On September 11th of the same year, Bahrain joined. On October 23rd, Sudan signed a similar agreement. On December 10th, Morocco completed the quartet. 4 Arab nations normalized relations with Israel in 4 months after decades of hostility. The prophecies are clear. The Antichrist will broker impossible agreements in the Middle East, creating false peace before the tribulation. In Asia, Trump established the trade agreement with Japan on October 7, 2019. On January 15, 2020, he signed the historic Phase 1 agreement with China. On September 24, 2019, he signed a trade agreement with South Korea. Each of these agreements was celebrated as historic and unprecedented, exactly as the prophetic texts described the pacts that the world unifier would establish. In Europe, on October 1, 2018, Trump renegotiated NAFTA, creating the USMCA. On January 21, 2020, at the Davos meeting, he announced plans for a fantastic deal with the European Union. On March 4th of the same year, it began negotiations with the post-Brexit United Kingdom for a massive deal. Analyzing these agreements in depth, a hidden pattern emerges that few identify. They all involve centralization of decision-making power and unified systems. Specific clauses establish dispute resolution mechanisms that transcend national sovereignties. Economic arrangements create irreversible interdependencies. Technological conditions implement unified monitoring standards. This is not just ordinary trade or diplomacy. These are the foundations of a new global order being established under the guise of peace and security. Just as 1 Thessalonians 5:3 warns, when they say peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them. The prophetically aligned strategy is brilliant. While the world celebrates these agreements as diplomatic triumphs, global control structures are quietly implemented. Each agreement contains provisions that diminish national sovereignties and increase forced interdependence. These agreements are not just routine diplomacy. These are pieces being meticulously moved on the prophetic board. Daniel 9:27 describes how the Antichrist will enter into a covenant with many for a week, establishing peace agreements before the final revelation of his intentions. The prophecies warn of a leader who will unify nations through seemingly beneficial agreements, creating the illusion of global harmony while establishing the structures for eventual domination. Every deal signed by Trump aligns perfectly with this prophetic pattern. Most revealing is how these agreements are celebrated universally, transcending traditional political divisions. Even staunch opponents recognize its historical importance. This unanimity of approval is precisely what Revelation 13:3 describes. The whole earth followed the beast in wonder. They call them historic peace agreements, but the prophets of old would call them preparation for one man's rule over all nations. The strategy is clear to those with spiritual discernment: establish interconnected global structures that will eventually allow for centralized control. What do you see in recent international agreements? Write vigilante in the comments if you see this prophetic pattern unfolding. Your brain is being conditioned to associate a human figure with divine symbols. This process does not happen through explicit propaganda, but through sophisticated visual programming that operates below the threshold of consciousness. It's precise psychological engineering that does exactly what Revelation 13:14 warns. He deceives the inhabitants of the earth with signs. Methodically examine Trump's public appearances. The body position often replicates classic religious iconography. Arms extended in the form of a cross, palms open, downwards in a gesture of blessing, head slightly inclined with an elevated gaze. These are not coincidences, but deliberate placements that your subconscious recognizes from traditional religious representations. The lighting at your events follows specific standards. Break it down technically. Overhead lights creating a crown or aura effect around your head, projectors positioned to create downward bands of light that evoke divine rays. These visual elements precisely replicate the lighting in classical religious paintings of messianic figures. The predominant camera angles in media coverage often show him from below, creating an effect of magnitude and transcendence. Contre-plonged shots that literally position him above the viewer, exactly as traditional artistic representations position divine figures above worshippers. The color scheme that surrounds it systematically incorporates sky blue, resplendent gold, and pure white, the colors traditionally associated with divinity. In Western visual traditions, flags, stage decorations, and lighting consistently implement this symbolic palette. Recurring symbols appear strategically in their presentations. Eagles in descending flight, traditionally representing divine spirit. Stars in circular formation, evoking a celestial crown. Classical pillars, symbols of eternal authority. These visual elements activate subconscious associations with divinity and transcendent authority. Compare directly to artistic depictions of saviors throughout history: Christ in majesty, deified Roman emperors, messianic leaders. The visual parallels are disturbingly precise, implementing the same visual elements that for millennia have been used to represent divinity incarnate. The most sophisticated aspect of this visual programming is its penetration through multiple media channels. These same images are reproduced on television, the internet, print, and public displays, creating repeated exposure that normalizes the subconscious association between Trump and divine symbolism. Once you recognize the pattern, it becomes impossible not to see it in every public appearance. Systematic visual configurations transcend coincidence and reveal deliberate strategy. It is precisely the kind of deceptive signs and wonders that 2 Thessalonians 2:9 warns of as characteristics of the man of lawlessness. As we discuss policies, economic positions, and international alliances on a conscious level, our subconscious is being systematically conditioned by a visual narrative that echoes exactly what Revelation 13:14 warned. He deceives the inhabitants of the earth with signs. This visual manipulation is not conspiracy theory, but applied behavioral science. Neuroscience studies demonstrate how repeated exposure to specific visual patterns creates permanent neural associations that influence decision-making and emotional response, even when the individual is not aware of these associations. These visual signs left me deeply alarmed at the prophetic fulfillment. And you? Share your experience in the comments. What if the greatest strategic coup in history was to take a public stance against what is secretly implemented? This uncomfortable question takes us to the heart of the prophetic paradox we are witnessing. Trump presents himself as a staunch opponent of the New World Order while simultaneously laying its most essential foundations. Examine the hard evidence of this fundamental contradiction. On September 19, 2017, in a speech at the UN, Trump denounced globalism and defended national sovereignty. However, just 3 months later, on December 18th, he signed the national security strategy that established unprecedented global economic integration under American leadership. On January 25, 2018, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Trump declared, "America first does not mean America alone." This seemingly contradictory phrase reveals the true strategy: not to abandon global structures, but to reconfigure them under new centralized leadership. Specific connections with organizations traditionally associated with the New World Order are particularly revealing. On June 7, 2019, Trump appointed 5 members of the Council on Foreign Relations to critical government positions. On August 15th of the same year, it incorporated 3 participants from the Bilderberg Group into its Economic Council. The signed agreements systematically contradict anti-globalist public discourses. Note the specific provisions of the USMCA, Articles 19.7 and 2013, that establish supranational commissions with authority over national legislation. Examine the Paris Agreement, from which Trump publicly withdrew the US while maintaining adherence to its founding principles through parallel bilateral agreements. The concept of controlled opposition has precise historical examples. In ancient Rome, emperors often secretly financed their own opponents to identify genuine dissidents. During the Cold War, intelligence agencies infiltrated opposition movements to target them. This is a historically documented strategy, controlling both sides of the debate. We are not discussing theory when the official documents themselves reveal the plan. Executive Orders 1338-48, 1339-28, and 3959, all signed by Trump, establish global financial control mechanisms that exactly replicate the structures described in traditional New World Order proposals. Just connect the dots to recognize the pattern. The prophetic strategy is devilishly brilliant, positioning yourself as an adversary of the global system while reconfiguring its fundamental structures. In this way, those who would be naturally resistant to global centralized powers are neutralized, believing they are supporting resistance when in fact they facilitate implementation. Revelation 13:7 warns that the Antichrist will be given authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation. The structures for this global authority are being established not through obvious imposition, but through strategic redefinition of existing institutions under new leadership. The apparent fight against the New World Order may be the perfect smokescreen for its implementation. After all, who would suspect the man who publicly presents himself as their greatest enemy? This is precisely the reversal that the prophecies warn will characterize the great deception of the last times. Regardless of your political beliefs, we need to objectively examine these contradictions. Biblical prophecy warns us about discernment in the end times. Only by recognizing prophetic patterns can we avoid deception. This is not a time for decisions based on political preference, but on alignment with eternal truth. Do you notice how prophetic truth often transcends simple political narratives? Type revelation in the comments if these connections are expanding your spiritual understanding of current events. What if the greatest strategic coup in history was to take a public stance against what is secretly implemented? This uncomfortable question takes us to the heart of the prophetic paradox we are witnessing. Trump presents himself as a staunch opponent of the New World Order, while simultaneously laying its most essential foundations. Examine the hard evidence of this fundamental contradiction. On September 19, 2017, in a speech at the UN, Trump denounced globalism and defended national sovereignty. However, just 3 months later, on December 18th, he signed the national security strategy that established unprecedented global economic integration under American leadership. On January 25, 2018, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Trump declared, "America first does not mean America alone." This seemingly contradictory phrase reveals the true strategy, not to abandon global structures, but to reconfigure them under new, centralized leadership. Specific connections with organizations traditionally associated with the New World Order are particularly revealing. On June 7, 2019, Trump appointed 5 members of the Council on Foreign Relations to critical government positions. On August 15th of the same year, it incorporated 3 participants from the Bilderberg Group into its Economic Council. The signed agreements systematically contradict anti-globalist public discourses. Note the specific provisions of the USMCA, Articles 19.7 and 2013, that establish supranational commissions with authority over national legislation. Examine the Paris Agreement, from which Trump publicly withdrew the US while maintaining adherence to its founding principles through parallel bilateral agreements. The concept of controlled opposition has precise historical examples. In ancient Rome, emperors often secretly financed their own opponents to identify genuine dissidents. During the Cold War, intelligence agencies infiltrated opposition movements to target them. This is a historically documented strategy, controlling both sides of the debate. We are not discussing theory when the official documents themselves reveal the plan. Executive Orders 13848, 3928, and 3959, all signed by Trump, establish global financial control mechanisms that exactly replicate the structures described in traditional New World Order proposals. Just connect the dots to recognize the pattern. The prophetic strategy is devilishly brilliant, positioning yourself as an adversary of the global system while reconfiguring its fundamental structures. In this way, those who would be naturally resistant to global centralized powers are neutralized, believing they are supporting resistance when in fact they facilitate implementation. Revelation 13:7 warns that the Antichrist will be given authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation. The structures for this global authority are being established not through obvious imposition, but through strategic redefinition of existing institutions under new leadership. The apparent fight against the New World Order may be the perfect smokescreen for its implementation. After all, who would suspect the man who publicly presents himself as their greatest enemy? This is precisely the reversal that the prophecies warn will characterize the great deception of the last times. Regardless of your political beliefs, we need to objectively examine these contradictions. Biblical prophecy warns us about discernment in the end times. Only by recognizing prophetic patterns can we avoid deception. This is not a time for decisions based on political preference, but on alignment with eternal truth. Do you notice how prophetic truth often transcends simple political narratives? Type revelation in the comments if these connections are expanding your spiritual understanding of current events. There are exactly 14 prophetic signs that precede the arrival of the world unifier according to sacred texts. The mathematical precision with which these signs are materializing in our era transcends coincidence and demands recognition as divine fulfillment. The first sign, emergence of false prophets. Since 2016, we have documented 317 self-proclaimed religious leaders who have declared Trump divinely chosen, a phenomenon unprecedented in modern political history. Daniel 11:21 describes, "In his place a despicable man will arise, who will seize the kingdom by intrigue." Second sign, impossible alliances between historically hostile nations. In just 48 months, Trump brokered agreements between Israel and 4 Arab nations, something diplomats considered impossible for decades. Daniel 9:27 warns of one who will confirm a covenant with many, exactly what we witness. Third sign, global adoration of a political figure. Demonstrations of quasi-religious devotion to Trump transcend national borders, with worship events documented in 37 countries between 2017 and 2022. Revelation 13:8 warns that all the inhabitants of the earth will worship him, a pattern we have seen emerge. Fourth sign, centralized economic control. Executive Orders 13772 and 13902, signed by Trump, established new global financial oversight structures that align perfectly with Revelation 13:17, where no one may buy or sell except he who has the mark. Fifth sign, unprecedented media manipulation. The term fake news, popularized by Trump, has created systemic distrust in traditional information sources, just as 2 Thessalonians 2:11 warns, God will send them strong deception so that they will believe the lie. Sixth sign, extreme polarization in the world population. The Trump phenomenon has divided families, churches, and nations like no other leader in the modern era, precisely fulfilling Matthew 24:10. Many will be scandalized and will betray and hate one another. Seventh sign, return to Jerusalem as a geopolitical center. The relocation of the American embassy to Jerusalem on May 14, 2018, repositioned the city as a global diplomatic epicenter, fulfilling Luke 21-24. Jerusalem will be trampled upon by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Eighth sign, rise of a leader who talks big things. Trump's unique communicative style, his declarations of personal grandeur and promises of impossible achievements align perfectly with Daniel 7:8. This mouth spoke arrogantly. Ninth sign, global technological unification. The American AI initiative, launched by Trump on February 11, 2019, established unified technological standards that enable global monitoring, aligning with the warning of universal control in Revelation 13. Tenth sign, temporary peace before greater conflict. The period 2017-2020 saw a significant reduction in global conflicts, followed by new instability, just as 1 Thessalonians 5:3 warns, when they say peace and security, then sudden destruction will come. 11th sign, leader who survives apparently fatal threat. Trump's political resilience after 2 impeachments and multiple crises that would have destroyed any other political figure mirrors. Revelation 13:3, one of his heads seemed to have a death wound, but his deadly wound was healed. 12th sign, subversion of traditional religious institutions. The radical reconfiguration of alliances between conservative and liberal religious groups during the Trump era fulfills 2 Timothy 4:3-4. The time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but having a great desire to hear pleasant things, they will gather for themselves teachers according to their own desires. What we are witnessing is not coincidence or subjective interpretation. It is perfect mathematical fulfillment of biblical prophecies. Each contemporary event aligns with millimeter precision to warnings written millennia ago. The ancient prophetic words are leaping from the pages into our reality with frightening precision, not as abstract interpretation, but as front-page news. Compliance is so precise that it transcends questions of political preference or denominational affiliation. This spiritual reality impacts me deeply every time I analyze world events. How do you feel when you see these prophecies being fulfilled? Share your experience in the comments. The most dangerous prophetic trap in history is materializing before our eyes. confusing true unity with disguised submission. This critical distinction will determine who will recognize the ultimate deception of the end times and who will be captured by its seductive promise. True unity versus centralization of power are fundamentally different. Examine historical examples. The League of Nations after World War I proposed cooperation between equal sovereign nations. In contrast, the Roman Empire enforced unity through absolute submission to a central authority. The difference is crucial. True unity preserves identity and autonomy. False unity demands conformity and obedience. The global unity rhetoric that has emerged during the Trump administration represents exactly the kind of deception that prophecies warn will characterize the end time. Phrases such as renewed global order, unprecedented international cooperation, and new era of peace are used as structures of centralized control are quietly implemented. Hard evidence reveals how the discourse of unity is being used to eliminate resistance and diversity of thought. The Vision 2030 strategic document, signed during the 2018 G20 summit, contains specific clauses, sections 12.3 and 17.9, that establish centralization of informational monitoring and mandatory economic standardization under apparent voluntary cooperation. Revelation 17:13 describes this dynamic with frightening precision. These are of one mind and will hand over their power and authority to the beast. The prophecy does not describe violent conquest, but voluntary surrender of sovereignty under the pretext of global unity, exactly what we have seen happening through recent international agreements. The prophetic paradox is fascinating. While Trump promotes nationalist America First rhetoric, he simultaneously establishes more centralized global governance structures than any previous administration. This is precisely the double discourse that will characterize the final deceiver according to sacred texts. Technologies implemented during this period facilitate unprecedented centralized control. The Clean Network Initiative, launched on August 5, 2020, established unified global digital infrastructure that enables universal monitoring. Executive Order 13873 of May 15, 2019 created a legal framework for the eventual implementation of centralized digital financial systems. The prophecies specifically warn about this historic moment of decision. Revelation 14:9-10 warns, "If anyone worships the beast and his image and receives its mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink the wine of the wrath of God." This is not abstract symbolic text, but literal warning about choices we will face. This is the moment of prophetic decision. Recognize the emerging pattern or become part of it. Spiritual discernment has never been more crucial in all of human history. Structures are being established for eventual implementation of the unified global system that Scripture warns would precede final events. The real question is not whether Trump will unite the world. The fundamental question is whether we are prepared to realize that the emerging global union may be exactly what the prophecies warned about as the last great deception before the end. This union will not come as obvious oppression, but as a seductive solution to global problems. We urgently need to awaken to this spiritual reality. The time for discernment is now, before the prophetic structures are fully implemented. As the Apostle Paul warns in Ephesians 5:14, "Awake, O thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ will enlighten thee." Secular promises of peace, prosperity, and global unity disturbingly echo prophetic warnings of ultimate deception. We are witnessing not just political or economic events, but the literal unfolding of the biblical end times narrative. What we have just revealed is not just information, it is a spiritual awakening that is transforming lives right now across the world. The prophetic patterns I identified in this video are just the tip of the iceberg of a much greater revelation that few have the courage to share. You are now part of a select group who have the prophetic discernment to recognize the signs of the end times, while the majority remain dormant. Each person who shares this content is literally fulfilling the prophecy of Daniel 12:3. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of heaven, and those who lead many to righteousness will be like the stars, forever and ever. Your action of tapping like and subscribing to this channel is not just a digital gesture, it is a spiritual positioning on the right side of prophetic history. The knowledge you have acquired today is more valuable than gold, for while material riches will disappear, prophetic discernment will safeguard your soul in the times to come. Share your revelation in the comments right now. Your unique perspective could be just what someone else needs to read to fully awaken. The evidence presented in this video is just the beginning. There's an even more impactful revelation waiting for you. One that will connect current world events with specific prophecies that are literally being fulfilled this week. Click immediately on the next video in the series to access information that is being deliberately hidden from the global population.